All right, everybody, welcome to This Week in Tyranny. Thank you for joining me. My name is Konrad Rogoz. I am your host. Today is Saturday, January 4th, 2025. It's the first episode of the new year. It's episode 109. I'm gonna really go rapid fire straight into this stuff. It's kind of like an informal show because I got a lot of information to get through. Uh, I'm gonna pack it in as much as I can. And here we go. Let's get started. The topic of this video is what happened in New Orleans specifically. Of course, that was the big event of the week, if you can call it that. 14 people were killed and 35 people were injured in a terror attack on Bourbon Street on New Year's Day in the New Orleans French Quarter. I know these things happen and everybody's got a video about it, okay? Why is this video different? What is the big deal? Well, it's not really about this event, right? We're going to talk about this shit is chess, not checkers, and specifically having to do with Islam and Judaism, and the way you've got socialism uh, being coming out of both of these ideologies. Even though there's a war, there's a lot of confusion there, but under all of this, well, what's underlying is the movement of the people, especially America, but the entire world, towards a socialist type of authoritarian, totalitarian state. Now, it's not the only kind of totalitarian state, okay? Socialism is not the only enemy. It's not the only tyranny out here. Tyranny is out everywhere. But we're pointing out this one because this is the agenda. This is the goal, right? And events like this totally drive the people to that goal. So that's going to be the background for what I really want to get across. And my point is, not we're going to spoil the ending in the beginning. The point is that people get caught in this dualistic thinking, and on both sides, both the pro-Israel and the pro-Palestine side is radicalized. You're becoming pushed because there is a big conflict going on, and conflicts and this fight or flight type of thinking, it makes people dumb. It makes people stupid as a group. It makes people not think about history. It makes people not see the underlying factors that are causing these events, let alone what we really need to be thinking about as human beings living in the world today in 2025. So, the FBI has identified the suspect of carrying out this attack as Shamsuddin Jabbar, 42 years old, of Texas. Jabbar was driving a Ford pickup truck, which he rented from an app. He was an Army veteran who claimed to be a member of ISIS, right? They found an ISIS flag over in his truck. They found guns and they found explosive devices at the time of the attack, according to the FBI. Before we get too deep into it, I'm going to talk a lot about symbolism here, okay? And it might be a lot. I might be throwing a lot at you. For the people who are symbol literate, interested in the symbolism, there it is. So take it for what it's worth. Generally, though, this story, I've let it simmer for like 4 or 5 days now, and the emotion that is left for me is anger. It makes me really angry. I'm angry that people are so easily manipulated, they're so easily lied to, and that it's so easy to make them a puppet on a string, not only to cause chaos and violence, but to respond in exactly the way that helps the same people who are orchestrating this type of chaos and violence. And we're not just talking about the person that carried out this attack. We're also talking about the kind of people that would plan an attack like this, if you're so inclined to believe, right? So either way, no matter what this is, we're getting the worst possible outcome, which is the people responding in exactly the way that they've been programmed to do. And I'm angry because people are so easily become these lone nuts and mass shooters. There are too many of them. There are people that want to carry out these attacks. All you got to do is go downtown and go to your nearest metro, and you'll see a bunch of people as you walk down the street. You're thinking, what do these people have in their minds? People have just become so lost. They've lost it, okay? A lot of people are just, you don't feel safe around them because of how they act. It seems like people have just lost their mind, okay? Then there's that, and then you've got your non-violent but still radicalized sections, your snowflakes, your radical feminists, all the critical theory people that want to do away with anything that may have anything to do with being white or being male. It's this type of just hostility out of nowhere. These are all the people at the front lines of your protests. They're still wearing the masks. But then at the same time, you've got these anti-foreigners. You got these pro-white conservatives. Everybody's so pro-America now. Okay, it's great, but they're being radicalized as well. And then you got people in general who are just caught up in the simple binary thinking. Okay, they're the most enlightened group of the three, but they're still caught in this dualistic thinking. And rarely does anyone mention the nuance where we talk about Islam and we talk about Judaism and even talking about banking. And so few people take it back to the historical roots. And even I won't do it in this episode, because if we're talking about Israel and Palestine, we need to talk about like back to the Knights Templar and the ancient history of power in Europe, and then all the Egyptian symbolism, which we'll talk a little bit about. But this happened the same night that a soldier blew himself up outside of a Trump hotel in Las Vegas. You had a separate event where you had those ugly cybertruck cars, the Teslas, exploded in front of a Trump hotel. The FBI also confirmed that there's no link between Jabbar's attack and the Tesla that exploded in Las Vegas. That's what they said. No, of course not. Of course there's no link. There's no link between any of that. And there's definitely no link between that and Notre Dame being scheduled to play Georgia at the Superdome that same day, January 1st, at the Superdome in the quarterfinals of the college football playoffs. Of course, when we talk about the Superdome, you may remember another huge event being Hurricane Katrina, another traumatic event. And that happened with everybody, with the Superdome being the center of that, where people were sheltered. Okay, you had Kanye West go on TV and say George Bush doesn't care about black people. Okay, very anti-government at that time. Now Kanye is very pro-government, right? Because he's a Trump supporter and he's very anti-Jewish, at least in the way he's portrayed, right? And some of the people he's been aligned with. I'm not calling him anything. I'm just saying. Okay, this is how the story's playing out. Now, when we talk about the Superdome, this football stadium, anytime you talk about a dome or dome-shaped structures, some of you guys know this. It's female symbolism. It goes back to the goddess worship. It goes back to Egypt and before. Okay, now that, of course, it's a feminine symbol because the dome is a curve. It's not just the shape of the breast; it's the shape of the belly. It symbolizes pregnancy. So anytime you've got a curve like that, an arch like that, this is a feminine symbol. What else is feminine? Notre Dame, the school that is playing Georgia, of course. They're not the only teams playing, but they're significant. They're very significant because of what they represent, not just symbolically but also historically. Notre Dame, of course, it means Our Lady. Notre Dame de Paris, it's Our Lady of Paris. Of course, that school's name refers to the Virgin Mary. Now, this thing with France, of course, so they're not, they're in Indiana, but they come from the French tradition, at least immediately so in their name. Now, the thing with France and the woman as being this grand symbol, it goes deep. And again, I won't do it justice going into it, because then we got to talk about the origins of goddess worship, and we do have to talk about the Knights Templar and this kind of stuff that I would refer you to Michael Tessarion for, and not only all these other researchers. It's really so extensive, but I'm going to point out one thing is that Statue of Liberty that we have in New York, it was a gift from the French. And France and America have so much in common culturally, specifically when it comes to the revolution. You've got the American and French Revolution happening at the same time. And when I say Notre Dame, so I've talked about some of this other symbolism having to do with the dove and the killing of the cremation of care, the killing of the mother goddess, all of the Columbia rituals, the Columbia shuttle, okay, all these kind of sacrifice events where you had the burning, the Notre Dame Cathedral burnt down in Paris, right? So you have this as well. And with that and the Statue of Liberty, it's not a one-to-one comparison at all. I'm not saying the Statue of Liberty is the same as Notre Dame de Paris, but it's no accident either. And Georgia, as well, is the feminine name of the Greek of the Greek origin meaning farmer or earth worker. So Georgia, anything that has to do with George and Georgia has to do with the earth. And it means farmer. It also means earth. It means land. But it also means Gaia, the Greek earth goddess. Georgia is Gaia, the personification of the earth. So when you had Notre Dame playing Georgia, it's this kind of, you had the pure aspect of the woman, and then you had the earthly aspect of the woman. George is also similar to Joseph. For me, it reminds me of the biblical Joseph, the son, the father of Jesus, the legal father of Jesus Christ. Joseph was a carpenter. When I think of an earth worker, that's what it is. It's a carpenter. So it's also like Mary and Joseph. And of course, this happens on New Year's, which is a week after Christmas, right? This is the birthday of Jesus, and so on and so forth. But either way you see it, you have a coming together of a heavenly energy and an earthly energy. You've got this duality there. And long story short, I think it's all about a ritual. Not just Judaism and Islam, but when you've got this guy, Shamsuddin Jabbar, who ran down all these people in New Orleans, of course he's a Muslim who then swore allegiance to the Islamic State. And then I'll read a story that came out that there were 2 Israelis actually out of those people that got injured. Of course, this is happening all in the midst of the Israel-Palestine war that is going on, right? Now, with Judaism and Islam, I'm throwing out a lot of things at once, but there's a big female and male symbolism there for me, because you've got the 5 and the 6, you've got the seal of Solomon on the Jewish flag, having the number 6. But then when you look at the symbolism of Islam, you've got the crescent moon, which is historically a female symbol, and also the 5-pointed star. You've got the Star of 5, and I've talked about how that number 5 has to do with the woman, and the number 6 having to do with the man. There's a lot more there. I would point to what they're concerned with, especially when it comes to their practices having to do with like circumcision in the Judaic religion. They cut off the foreskin of the boy when he is born. They circumcise them, right? And they're very concerned with the male in that way, and having to do with his connection to God, right? It's a very male oriented religion. Now, culturally so, you could say the same about Islam, of course, but I would say that, of course, Islam is patriarchal, but Islam is much more concerned with the woman. Why? Because you basically clothe them head to toe in black, right? So it's this obsession with the woman, and that is true to the symbolism. It's much more feminine in that way. Of course, you had if you could call it the female equivalent of circumcision, you have female genital mutilation going on in the more extreme Muslim circles. Okay, I don't mean to blame Islam for that. I'm not saying that's standard, but it totally puts women in a box, and that is how I see this. They both also the white and black. If I recall correctly, when you see the Muslim men, you're going to see them in white, and you're going to see the women in black. Right? When I see all the Saudi Arabians in Abu Dhabi hosting the boxing events, you'll see them all wearing white, and when you see the women, they're in black. I don't mean to be inaccurate as far as that goes, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Now, when you see the Jews, their men wear black. I talked about the little black cube, also that the Jewish... There's a big overlap right there, okay, in the Jewish and the Muslim religions. Of course, there's more having to do with the black cube, the Kaaba, which I'll talk about. But it should not be lost on any of us that this happens in New Orleans, in Louisiana. And Louisiana, of course, used to be French. You've got this whole French connection in New Orleans, especially Bourbon Street. These are all French words. And Louisiana, of course, comes from the name Louis, King Louis, right? Louis the 16th. He was the last king of France before the fall of the monarchy during the French Revolution. Okay, and again, there Notre Dame is playing Georgia there, and George, of course, was the king of England during this time, during the American War of Independence as well. George III, early in his reign, Great Britain defeated France in the 7 Years' War. Okay, that was King George, and that was, if I'm correct, it was against Louis the 15th, his grandfather, or I may have gotten those reversed, but it was Louis and George. England and France, and they were at war with each other at this time. The 7 Years' War was, um, was going on. Um, George III was the king that when the American Revolutionaries won the American War for Independence. Then he had more wars again with Napoleon, and then you had the Battle of Waterloo, right? And that was all of that. And this is a callback to that. And when we talk about Islam and Judaism and the opposites, I'm seeing America and France here as well, because the American and French revolutions, even though they were both revolutions, both occurring at the same general time, they were completely total polar opposites when it comes to what they stood for. When it comes to property, individual versus collective control, and then cultural control. So property, the American Revolution was based on property ownership, individual property ownership. Now the French Revolution was all about doing away with property. It was people don't talk about it. This was a socialist revolution, not the kind that we're talking about, where it comes from equality, rights, human rights coming from God. That was the American Revolution. The French Revolution was all about doing away with the aristocracy, cutting the heads off the monarchy, doing away with the rich. And it was a very collective spirit about the people of France and this great mass of the people taking over, and a strong central state. And then there was cultural control there. They actually had, I just was reading a book about the history of music in Europe, and after the French Revolution, they actually instituted like a ministry of music. I don't know what it was called, but it was about controlling the type of music that's coming out. It had nothing to do with freedom the way you and I see it. The French Revolution was a communist revolution, actually. I don't know why that's not talked about more. And as this beautiful Western society comes to an end, this kind of wealth and freedom that's rooted in Enlightenment ideals and Renaissance and all of this, and now you have this French-American connection, which, by the way, the French connection is the reason for the United States debt. At least that's the stated reason. The reason we have so much debt and we got caught in the Federal Reserve System is because we had to borrow from the French to win the revolution. Then we had wars with the French, right? And really, that's the reason, is specifically our dealings with France. But no, it's supposed to have no ritualistic, symbolic relation that these two teams were going to play. I know it's just a football game, but there is more. So there's more symbolism. I was watching a game a couple hours ago. It was the Baltimore Ravens. They were hosting the Cleveland Browns, and this is the first game of the weekend of the last regular season week. And I'm watching the introduction of this NFL game. They don't do the anthem and a big show before every game, but some of them they do, and they did during this one. And before the game, they didn't just honor the victims and have a moment of silence for the victims that died in the attack in New Orleans. They also honored Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter just died. He lived to be 100 years old. Now, why do they do this? Jimmy Carter was basically Joe Biden. The way he symbolized, he symbolized the idea of being like asleep at the wheel for most Americans. Like that was what his presidency was. It was very much like Joe Biden, and what he stood for and how he behaved. He was very lukewarm and benign. And of course, he ran in the 1980 election. He ran against Ronald Reagan, and I've already done videos about how Ronald Reagan is Donald Trump. It's basically the same characters all over again. And then I see this. They're showing, this, he's 100 years old, and I think of this, and then I just read about George and Louis in the 100 Years' War. Again, this is the French and the English back in the 13th century or so, right? The Great 100 Years' War, and now you have, and Jimmy Carter. Carter, by the way, is a French word, right? Chartier. A Carter means a driver, like a cart driver, like pulling a wagon. So I've already talked about that connection with Carter and him being a passenger on the wagon, and the funny thing about that. But that French and American connection, it's resurfacing again, and you see this. You see it coming around after the pandemic and everything. People are talking all about revolution. But there are two kinds of revolutions that could happen. There could be the real Second American Revolution, where we return to the ideals that the country was originally founded upon. But no, where we're going is actually a socialist revolution, like the French. This is the whole point. But of course, the Tesla truck exploding had no relation either. No relation to Judaism and Islam, somehow. When, of course, Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla, of course, everything he does, his company Tesla, it seems to mirror the black cube. The black cube is a concept of artificial hyper information. It's like boxing spirit into matter. Like if you take the rainbow and what it is, the expression of colors or anything, and you make it artificial and condensed and basically everything about surveillance and control and information, artificiality. The black cube is a symbol of that. It's like a black hole, and it's been also it's this deep idea of the black sun, or what's behind the power of the sun, right? There's the two faces of the sun. One is the outward solar power that everybody sees. We've got this all astro-theological symbolism, but the black cube, whether it's a cube or not, but the idea of this black object standing behind the solar symbolism is the real object of worship, or the concern of the dark occultists. And you see all of our devices are like this. They're rectangular, cubical, black structures, the black mirror. I'm looking into one right now with the camera. That's how it goes. And this is what Elon Musk is all about with Neuralink and these endeavors of his. Okay, not talking about Doge and Bitcoin and the stuff that he is also involved. I'm talking about his work with artificial intelligence, with information gathering. Okay, this whole thing with X. X is of course the symbol of is Osiris. You see the Egyptian Osiris also with his arms crossed. Then that ties into the serpent symbolism and all this stuff that I won't get into. But the cube has 6 faces. The hexagon has 6 sides, and there's a hexagon on the North Pole of Saturn. I've talked about this. It's a literal hexagon on the North Pole of Saturn. It's like a gigantic planetary storm. Okay, and it's actually on the planet of Saturn, and Saturn is the 6th planet from the sun. And there's a 6-sided shape on the North Pole of that planet. And when we talk about the black cube, it is associated with that. It is very Saturnian. The Saturnians wear black. This is why you see the high priests of these religions, not just the high priest. The priest class of these religions is wearing black. That's what it's for. The Tefillin, I talked about the Jews. They sometimes wear this black cube on their hands, on their left hand while they pray. This is again a call to Saturn. Then when you see the hexagon on the Star of David, that is also a 6-pointed star. A lot of people don't know that. Some people know that. But, let's keep going with it. Elon, the name itself, it's El-On. The El, of course, is the ancient Hebrew, Babylonian. El has always been the Father God. It's the Hebrew Father God. Of course, this is having to do with light. Everything El, electrical, the Elohim. Um, it's solar. And again, I talked about solar, not just the idea of light, the way people think of it, but then there's also a darkness behind the light, which is the true religion for the inner circle. It's El An, and An, of course, is another electrical word. It has to do it's all about power. And this is the kind of stuff that Elon is, of course, interested in, right? The Starlink satellite systems, Tesla being this information car that's self-driving, X having to do with instant communication, and there's just this guy's out here more and more and more. He's become this kind of rock star, and somehow he's aligned himself with Donald Trump, and people don't see him as part of this technocratic, futuristic system, this other wing of the system that is going to be run concurrently with the socialism that is coming. It's all part of the agenda, but again, like, who talks about that? They just give Elon a pass because he says a few good things, you know? And as we're on this kind of ancient Egyptian symbolism, you have this guy, Shamsuddin Jabbar. He swore allegiance to ISIS, and he was carrying the flag of ISIS. ISIS is the Islamic State, right? Islamic State. But Isis is actually an Egyptian goddess, of course. And this is all happening as we are in this Israel-Palestine conflict surfacing again. It's an age-old conflict, but it's back again now. And once again, you've got the Judeo-Christian West and the communist Islamic East. And it's happening at the beginning of the year. Why? Symbolically, why all the symbolism with France and England? It's to show us, it's showing us where we're going. And we're going to repeat history. I'm not even saying, the point is not that somebody's coordinating all this stuff. I'm saying this is a story unfolding and it's staring you in the face and nobody is recognizing what we're actually doing. We're going to repeat history, and we're going to repeat the cycle of mass death and of suffering. And the promise and the hope of this world is slipping away. And that pisses me off, because we have an opportunity for forward motion right now in the world, and it's going away. And it's really kind of a joke how far behind people are from the understanding of what's going on in this world, because it runs way deeper than whatever's in your Telegram chat and whatever your podcasters are telling you. It's also a little bit ridiculous how much time I spend every week talking about these intricate details of things, when at the end of the day, this isn't even the pressing matter. Like, this isn't even what I need to talk about. The pressing matter is that we are no longer living a genuine life connected to our genuine selves, connecting to each other in a genuine way. So, I could say all these things, and then, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. There are people that know a lot of stuff that could blow my mind, having to do with what's going on in the world, and there's information that I don't have. But this is not even the problem, the lack of information. The problem is there's so much we're getting bombarded with. There are so many distractions at every avenue of life that no matter, even if I totally inspire you and give you the weapons and the tools to change your life and the things we need to come together, it is going to get lost. It is so easy. There's such a short-term memory. There's such a difficulty in just manifesting things to happen because of how much of our time we're losing. We're losing time. It's harder to maintain connections with people. It's not just a government thing. It's not just a dark spiritual war agenda thing. This is also the result of our choices, and the more of our choices are combining, and there's this I forget the word. It's not symbiotic. It's a synergistic effect that's intensifying our own isolation that we're inflicting on ourselves and the people around us. The point is, we no longer live life itself, and we treat human life, very poorly. Not just human life, but life in general. We even treat inanimate objects very poorly. It's an all-around shit show. And this is what I should be talking about, but I decided to make a show called This Week in Tyranny, and I've done 109 episodes of it, so I'm going to keep going with the symbolism and the name. I got to talk about the name of the attacker. You know, I don't mean to make light of anything, but the other joke here is in the name. His name is Shamsuddin Jabbar. And if you break the name up, you have the word sham. A sham is like a fake, a scam. A sham is a phony event. And then if you cut if you take the next six letters, it's Sham Sadin. Okay, middle name is Dean. Okay, Sadin, Suddin. That's the word sudden. Okay, something happens suddenly. A sham happens suddenly out of nowhere, and then his last name is Jabbar, Jabbar. We all know what a jab is, right? So a Jabbar, it's just one letter from jabber. It's a sham, and there was a sudden jabber. He ran a pickup truck that was like that was like the weapon. It was like the spearhead, and he rammed it through people. Is that not what a jab is? This is exactly what happened. Shamsuddin Jabbar is the name of him. And look, I'm not saying anybody set his name up. I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just saying that the symbolism is showing you it's ridiculous the extent to which it goes. Almost every like big shooting and a mass event, I go on here and I talk about all this symbolism. Like how could it even be happening like this? It's so improbable, impossible, that everything would tie into everything and all be synchronized. And it's 11:11 as I say this. So let's transition. There's an article. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but the article came out that there were 2 Israelis among the people who were injured. Okay, and this was reported by Elad Shosan. He's a Israeli diplomat in the Southwest United States. He's based in Houston, but he traveled, and then apparently he traveled to the site, and somebody asked him, and he said that the families of the 2 injured Israelis would like to keep their names private. They are not local, and there are 2 Israeli tourists, both men in their mid to late 20s, who decided to come to the United States for about a month and a half. And those 2 people from Israel that were injured in this attack, they were actually reservists who were called back to fight in the war, okay, in Israel. So they were called in to fight in the war in Israel. So I just want to talk about the odds of that happening, like not even if it's true or not, just to point it out that the symbolism applies. And I want to make that a point. I want to make it a point to show objectively that these things are happening, and that the narrative is so clear that it really deserves your immediate attention, to not get caught in the binary thinking when the symbolism is showing that there is an agenda, a deeper meaning behind it. 2.4% of the population is Jewish. So then 2 people out of 30 would be 6.7%. Okay, so it's 3 times as likely, but that's still not that impressive. But we're talking about Jews. Nobody said that these people were Jewish. It's just that they were from the country Israel. They could have been any religion, right? But that's worldwide. Now, what about Israel, the country? The population of Israelis living in the United States is 1 out of 346. So it's a 0.29% chance. So you'd have to talk to 350 people on average to meet 1 Israeli. And then you had 2 people at the same time, so you can multiply that probability. But of course, they came together, and hey, improbable things happen. But that's all to say that it's so statistically improbable. And I think it's not the point if this is actually true, or it's just somebody just wrote an article. Nobody knows if this guy actually said that or what it was all about. But the point is that bit of information is thrown out there to be out there in the internet, and it's there to stir the pot, and that's why I bring it up. Because when people start talking about Jews, that as a concept, it always surfaces whenever governments are making big moves against the people, especially big moves on their freedom and property rights. And I'm seeing a lot of this now. There's such an obvious anti-Jewish sentiment now. I know a lot of it is in BitChute, and it's on YouTube comment sections. Okay, But it is growing. People I talk to, I hear it. And it's just a misguided, incorrect identification of the enemy and a lack of understanding of the roots of problems. And I get all about the Rothschilds. I get all about the ownership of Hollywood and the media and of communications, right? I made a video called Mark's Jewish role in the occult web of control. I know. I'm just saying that this kind of stuff, what people are getting caught up in, it's exactly what the German society got caught up in the 1930s. It's the same thing. And I've pointed out those parallels long ago. And it is playing out just like that. Down to the assassination attempts on Donald Trump, same as the assassination attempts on Adolf Hitler. This whole thing with him being politically persecuted and then coming back, right? He wrote Mein Kampf, then he came out of jail, where Trump got impeached, and then he had the whole trial, then he came back. And at the same time, we're getting all these cool AI translations of Adolf Hitler's speeches in English. Maybe you've seen some of them. But you should look it up, and you could actually listen to him talk and what's sounding like his voice. And when people hear it in English, obviously none of us have listened to Hitler's speeches before. And then you hear these speeches, and people, a lot of people are thinking, they're saying, wow, he seems to be saying really sensible things. He seems to be making a lot of sense. Maybe we've been lied to. Okay, maybe history has been a lie, and they've been lying about a lot of what happened then and afterwards. Okay, I get it. I'll give you that. But it's going to be the same thing when you listen to Vladimir Putin, and I've done that. And the things he talks about with a lot of this radical leftism, you listen to him and say, yeah, he's right. This guy's right. He says a lot of sensible things, and they do. These people speak well. They point out a lot of things. There's a reason Hitler got so popular around that time. Because at a time where everybody seems to be controverting reality, running from reality, they point out reality. And it's what everybody needed. And people say, aha, that's our guy. But of course, it's a scam. It's a joke. I mean, look what happened to Germany because of that. They went on board of a satanic agenda. Just look at what the people that listened to them did. It's not about what this leader says. It's about what are you going to do once he's in power. And again, I've talked about that parallel with America in the 2010s, 2020s, and then Germany in the 1920s and 1930s. It's just old formulas that are getting recycled again. And that's why Israel and the Jewish people are becoming a more prominent topic. And I think back to 9/11 and the dancing Israelis. Remember that? There were 5 men arrested on September 11th in New York, and they were art students. And you can actually look it up. I'm gonna link it. You could look it up on YouTube. And they went back to Israel and they did a show, and they said, yeah, we were there to document the event, and that happened. These people were there. They got caught like on top of a van, recording the planes hitting the towers when it was a sudden attack, and then they were high-fiving reportedly, right? Now, that happened, and do I think that Israel got caught red-handed and they had their spies there to record and their spies got caught high-fiving each other? Absolutely not. I used to, when I was finding this research back when I was like 13, 14, I used to think that. I no longer do. It's just so conveniently placed. I mean, why would these guys, why would they have some art students? But it's really not the point. That story is really interesting, and I'm actually going to link to a website that talks about that story, because that moving company that all 5 of these young guys worked for, they were working for a moving company. That, by the way, that's not a very Jewish thing to do. You'd think they were lawyers or doctors or something, right? No, they were moving furniture, I guess. But the federal government gave that company $500,000 in June of 2021. Five months before. I'll link that. And while I was looking at that website, thewashingtonstandard.com, I saw an article right next to it on New Year's Eve when these attacks happened, the New Orleans one and the Tesla truck exploding. There are videos of lightning striking both the U.S. Capitol, dome-shaped structure of our government, the Washington Monument, the Empire State Building, and the One World Trade Center that they built on top of Ground Zero where the World Trade Center towers fell. So these four great symbolic buildings, you've got lightning striking them all. Now I don't know how frequent that is, how rare that is, but I will just point out more of the symbolism. The Washington Monument is an Egyptian obelisk. The Egyptian obelisk is of course, there's a whole legend about the phallus of Osiris. Okay, the son of Isis, son and husband of Isis. So again, Egyptian symbolism. When we talk about Washington and the buildings there, you can look up how those buildings are arranged in geometrically, and they make all these shapes, and then they have all the zodiacs there, and how that goes back to Egypt. And again, it's lightning striking them. So it may even be like a natural element to these cycles, right? All these coincidences that aren't coincidences, they may actually be done by nature and not human beings, right? But either way, we could change these cycles if people just opened their eyes and refused to inject themselves into these historical cycles of violence, because that's what we're doing. All the stuff we're spending our time on, even if you're the most hardcore, even if you're libertarian, even if you're an anarchist, the things we spent our time on, we're part of this. We're part of this problem. We're getting pulled closer and closer to being part of this two-sided conflict that is going to come up again. It's divide and conquer all over again. And there's a lot, with radical Islam and everything, and the Jewish connection. It does bring up World Trade Center and September 11th a lot, and I think of the year 2001 and Event 201, which is numerically the same thing. 201, 2001. Event 201 happened during the pandemic, and that was the whole exercise, having to do with a global response, global government, and the whole idea of 201, it makes me think of, out of the two, you have the one. So that's the Hegelian dialectic. Out of two competing forces, you get a synthesis. And this is the whole part of these agendas, the whole point, the whole reason all these events happen. We used to not have terrorism for so long, and now we have it happening like every day, every week. And this is what's on the dollar bill. E pluribus unum, right? Out of many, one. That's 201. That's 2001. It's divide and conquer. And the start of the new year, it seems to be a call back to that, a call back to neoconservatism. For one, remember that's what happened in 2001, where the Muslims attacked and then everybody was ready to go into Iraq for some reason, right? This is what we're getting again, and not that we're getting true conservative values, but we're getting all the negative manifestation of that type of administration style. And that's exactly what happened under Ronald Reagan. I've called those parallels out. What we had under Reagan is in the 80s was 8 years of destruction. And people say America was great in the 80s, and it was, but that's because of all the groundwork, all the stuff that happened before that wasn't destroyed yet. Because you had destruction happening there under the surface in the 1980s, and that's the way it goes. Because Ronald Reagan was all about reducing the size of government and decreasing taxes, right? But payroll taxes doubled under Ronald Reagan, and I did the calculations. In 1980, we're talking just the Social Security and Medicare taxes. Maximum taxable income was $25,900 for a combined 12% or so. I did the calculations on that. It was $3,175 that you would get taxed. Then in 1989, after the Reagan presidency was over, it was increased to $45,000. You would get taxed on $45,000 of your income, and it was more like 15%. So you would have $6,759 compared to $3,200. So your taxes more than doubled. And that was supposed to be the lower the taxes guy, right? And while half the country is going to go for that bullshit, that nationalistic America first bullshit, the other half is going for the other bullshit lie, which is utopian socialism. And you get all this talk about revolution and rebellion, and the word intifada is coming up. Intifada, of course, is the Arabic word for uprising. And you get this term now, globalize the intifada, right? Not just get Israel out of the Gaza Strip and West Bank. They do that and they say globalize the intifada, and they say the West is next, saying, they're going to get Israel out of there and do away with the injustice going on in Palestine, but then they're also going to do away with the corporate injustice and everything in the United States, right? This is all sounding very similar to Luigi Mangione, right? It's the same thing as Black Lives Matter was. Like, you had an unarmed black man get shot. Obviously, those cops fucking killed that man. Obviously, that's an injustice. Obviously, we need to do away with this police brutality. And then you get a slogan that totally makes sense. Black Lives Matter. Of course they do. And then what's behind it? Socialism. What's behind it? You got anti-nuclear family, right? That was all on the front page. George Soros, all this stuff, right? Do away with everything. Do away with the country's borders. Do away with the country's symbols. Tear down the statues. Okay, so you give them one thing, and then they bring all this socialism in. These are socialist tactics, and Michael Tsarian has an extensive section about Islamo-communism. I need to go into some research about that because I'm kind of fresh to the concept, but I did some research on Arab socialism, and you should please look it up. Look up Arab socialism, and people are absolutely not noticing that when you see a lot of this anti-Israel protests, which I agree with. I agree with the state of Israel doing apartheid, that they were doing apartheid, and it's an occupation, and it's an open air prison, and it is a genocide. I talk about the doctors that are talking about the genocide of kids. Yeah, that's all true. But the same people protesting for all of that, it's a Trojan horse, and behind that you're getting all of this socialism. You get the whole Arab socialism. And that goes back to the original, the Palestinian Front, the Muslim Brotherhood, and all these other organizations that are even more outwardly communist. Okay? And at the same time, I'm noticing, I'm seeing a lot of this anti-Jewish sentiment. The big problem is that these people have money. And I can't stand people who have this hatred and jealousy and envy, that hate people just because they are successful. I have a big problem with people wanting to tear down profit makers and tear down business infrastructure. Business infrastructure that is the foundation for their own well-being, right? Like, we're talking about society's functions, right? We're talking about, like the restaurants they eat at. This is what I'm talking about. People want to tear a lot of this stuff down because of a slogan, but they don't actually know what they're tearing down. They don't know how much patience, how much work, how much intellect, how much stability, how much structure it takes to build these things. What makes the plumbing companies, right? Or the who takes the trash out, all the stuff that makes a city work. Yeah, what it takes to generate that. And you have people that just want to tear everything down, who have money because they were exploitative in the way they earned their money. And meanwhile, these people don't actually know how to create wealth. They can't actually create societal infrastructure to replace that. And a lot of this anti-Zionism today, it's just anti-capitalism. This is part of the dialectic. It doesn't mean I'm pro-Israel. I'm not. But don't get hoodwinked here. And then the Jewish banking families and the owners of media and Hollywood, they're also pushing socialism. They're pushing socialism even though the socialism is actually wants to destroy Israel. So it's a double cross. It's a Trojan horse on both sides. And I say this, to me, the biggest enemy of Jewish people in the world today is the state of Israel, especially its high officials and its intelligence. Because the actions that they are taking over there in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, and what they're engaged in, this is what turns the entire world against Israel. If they just turn a camera on. I mean, it's not sheer, you know, average Jew out there, Jewish person out there that is dropping those bombs on and targeting hospitals. I mean, how much more ridiculous can it get? But then at the same time, the biggest enemy of everybody who's pro-Palestine, I think it is anti-Semitism. And I know that word is launched, at you when you say anything. I hate the label anti-Semitism. I hate these euphemisms that anytime you question anything, you're demonized. They want to silence you. I'm all for investigating. I'm all for investigating the Holocaust and the reports of that. Like even there, like I'm even willing to go there, even though my family, my great grandmother was in a concentration camp. So I ain't playing about this stuff. I ain't running from the truth on either side. But the people who can see very clearly that the state of Israel is engaged in immoral behavior and a genocide, there's a whole section of the people that is saying, yeah, that's right, I agree with you, and we need to get those Jews out of there. That's what they say. That's not what I say. I feel like this video is already not going to make it because even though I'm actually totally within the guidelines, I'm repeating things that are, so we'll see what happens. But I could give two shits about any of this. I really need to be talking about other things because this stuff is too polarizing. I don't think you can ever get through to people about this stuff and the dialectic there because it's so polarizing because it's such a opposite the way these cultures are. The Judeo-Christian culture and then the Islamic culture. And then both sides can point to injustice. Both sides can have their own source of information. And then there's a lot of emotional baggage that needs to be shed. And we've got hints now of a very old historical phenomenon coming back at this time. And this is kind of why I make this video and take it in that direction. And I'm seeing that we're getting close to people targeting Jewish businesses, targeting them. And my problem with that is when you're targeting businesses, you're stopping people from making money. And this is where you're going back to the pogroms of medieval Europe and all throughout history, right? This is the thing. A lot of these guys, they're not going to do anything to the Rothschilds. They're not going to do anything to the Warburgs. They're not going to do anything to the people that actually, need to get somebody. They need to get a knock on the door. But you're going to get everybody under them. You're going to get the doctors. You're going to get the lawyers. You're going to get people with some kind of connection to something. And that's how it's gone because the sentiment against Jewish people has always been a control valve, a buffer zone, a stopgap for the real controllers, the real priest class ruling elite, to make sure that they have somebody to throw under the bus whenever the fire gets too close. That's the whole point. And there's an article that talked about there was a pro-Palestinian group, and they posted a map of Jewish businesses in New York, I believe, that had, quote, blood on their hands. It's a group within our lifetime, which they say they backed the Hamas massacres. I won't make that claim, right? Because I know there's a lot of propaganda and there's a lot of calling everybody. There's the ADL and all this bullshit that they do, calling people this and calling people that. But they did post this map, and they said, know your enemy. These are the kind of organizations that are supporting genocide. And last year you had a similar occurrence. It was called the Mapping Project. It was a different group that was mapping out all of these fund foundations and money collecting for Israel, right? So this is the big thing because it's one thing to protest, but they're posting the location. They're saying know your enemy. Of course, that was quickly taken down and they had to apologize because it looks like you're inciting to violence. And on that topic, I had an episode about the free speech question having to do with that. That had to do with the guy who posted Elon Musk's private jet location. Anywhere Elon Musk was flying, this guy was posting the location live, and he was on Twitter, right? So the question is, like, does he have a right to do that? Because it's the sharing of information, which is free. He didn't steal that, right? Like, he didn't go be a private investigator and track him down. He didn't put a tracking device on him. He obtained that information legally, freely, rightfully, and he was just posting it, right? And it's just posting truth. So the question is, okay, like, you not just like when we talk about natural law, we talk like, is that actually right? How do you feel about that? Here's how I feel about this. I don't play with implications of violence, and I'm just saying I wouldn't tolerate someone trying to hide in that gray area, in the gray areas and fringes of natural law. It's like, standing out somewhere and you're like, hey, that guy's over there. It would be a shame if something happened to him. You don't even have to say it like that, but it's the implication of violence. And honestly, I don't understand why these Jewish organizations that got put on that map, they're not publicly revealing that they're the targets of Marxist provocateuring and that it's part of a centuries-old global conspiracy. Because that's what I would do if I was Jewish. I would come out and say, hey, all this anti-Jewish stuff is bullshit, but these people, the Rothschilds and all this stuff, they're false flagging. They're over here being Trojan horses. They're giving us a bad name. Yeah, we're sticking with our own people, and we're not going to apologize for that. But that's not us, right? I don't get what. So instead, they're hiding behind this system, and I think this is going to be to the Jewish community's disservice. I think it's a strategic misstep on their part. But I know the real answer. The real answer is these people are just trying to continue their financial, their cultural practices in the comfort of neutrality. This is why they don't engage in this stuff, right? This is why you don't see any Jewish people with their guns out in the street, because that's not how they're doing things. Because, again, this is not everybody, but they're businessmen, okay? And the first rule of doing business within the modern system is that you say nothing controversial. Don't offend anybody. Don't alienate anybody. And if you are going to take somebody down, you do it through a very impersonal, detached route. You do it through a lawyer. You do it through paying somebody off to smear them, to call them anti-Semitic, to do all that. And this is what these people do just so they could live their life in peace. And they got families too, right? So they're not playing about this bullshit. Okay, they're not gonna engage, and that's just the way it is. But my problem with these guys, these capitalists, right? They're relying on a system that creates peace. Yeah, free market and all this stuff, going to church and just doing your own thing and doing business dealings. It creates peace. It enables you to conduct business as usual when there's a peaceful situation, when there's a free market, when there is respect for property. But that's not what's happening today. These people are under siege, right? If somebody posts your location like that and you got protesters outside your building, you're under siege. And that's when it's like, no, time to get up from the fucking desk, put your stuff away, and you got to address the attacks. Revolutionary free market is going to be the end of oppression and corruption. It's not either going to be putting your hands over your ears and doing the corporate hierarchy as it has been. These voices are not going to go away. These Marxists are not going to go away. Nor is the answer to do away with capitalism, because you're going to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Okay. We need revolutionary free market. Okay. We need to, at this point, anybody that's in the way of that free market, we need to get the guns out. It's the only thing that's going to work. And then the only inequality and corruption and oppression that's going to be left after that, it will be the people who impose it upon themselves. Which to a large degree is true today. Everybody that's talking about all of this corruption going on and that they're being held down, most of them are holding themselves down. You know, I strongly believe in pointing the finger at ourselves. But the point is, if I ever find myself on a map like that, fucking bring it. I'm not waiting for somebody to come to me. I'll come to you. And fuck the gray area. I'm gonna make things real black and white whenever there's an implication of violence. And that's my suggestion to everybody that is a victim of violence or implications of violence today. Don't wait for the gray area. Make things black and white. Call things as they are. We need to get to know about what lies behind these agendas and say it so we can stop. So these people can stop. Stop. Don't talk about Jews around me. Don't talk about the Muslims around me. Because there's a historical basis here that goes further that is way deeper than mainstream history. So we can talk about that, but it's really not the big deal. The big deal is, how are you fighting back in what is essentially a war? Like, you're trying to play checkers when there's a war going on. We're not even talking about chess. But on the topic of gray areas and buffer zones, then when you look at people who are pro-Israel, how do you expect to have an occupied, segregated area, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, that has regular settler violence, regular, disease, starvation, and then support that government and think that you're going to live peacefully? I don't get that. And it's so obvious that the Israel-Palestine solution, since that nation came about in 1948, it was set up to fail. It's just like the migrants that are being brought here. It hurts both groups. It hurts the migrants that are being brought here and not getting the things that they're promised, getting some help but still not enough to make a living. They'll never be independent. They don't have the chance to. And of course it hurts the people that are funding the incentives that are going to those people. It hurts both groups. It's the same thing with Israel and Palestine. It was never meant to work. And I see it now. I really, this is something, I think this is one of the more difficult things to get. I think the role of Judaism and Islam and the way that goes, I think this is more complicated things to get when we talk about the workings of the world, honestly. And I see that they were tricked. The Jewish people were tricked by this global system to settle into Israel, and over there in Israel, not only to be a spearhead for the global agenda through, science, research, ideology, all this development, military, but the military also to be a operation of regional friction and destabilization and what is essentially a military outpost and a high-tech military testing ground is what Israel's become. And what it's done, the state of Israel, more than anything, it's unified and it's mobilized the authoritarian Chinese, the Russian, and Arab forces. That was the point. 1800s, early 1900s. This is why you had World War I, because the world was progressing so far since the American Revolution, and really the effects of the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, right? More of these effects of the exchange of information, romanticism, humanism, all this stuff, that just the sense of human life. Humans were starting to see life as beautiful and interact with each other more freely, shut off all the shackles of history, and still keep the things that are part of nature and that make us develop strong bonds. This is what was happening in the 1800s. So then you had World War I, and then this is what you had when you had, but before that, this Western world especially was setting itself apart so much. So what they needed, these ruling forces that don't want to develop the West, they don't want to develop anything. If two people are happy together and are creating something beautiful together, that's two people too many. They need to tear that down, because the roots of this control system that the priest class is behind, and the dark occult, these global communists, what lies behind that is really inversion of life, it's jealousy, it's envy, and it's a death cult. Okay, that's a very accurate way it's been described, as a death cult, which is who we're up against. What they needed is to tear the West down, yes, and build the East up. Okay, build up India, build up China, build up the Arab world, because they're not there. They haven't embraced those ideals. They haven't created that genuine wealth. They haven't created that respect for property and that individualism that has become a real issue for the generational ruling elites. That's the point. That's what Israel has done. I have much more, but it's an hour-long show already. So, I'm gonna skip. I'll say a few things. One of the things that shifted how I see Zionism, right? Even the whole Jewish thing in general. And I noticed this because I post videos on BitChute, and I'm being very hardcore, even that, and then anything that's not, and those guys there, they're so anti-Jewish, and not in a way that's enlightened about some of the Zionist Marxists, right? Not about Marcuse, not about Adorno, not about Marx or anything like that. You could just see that it's a low level. It's very low level. They're almost like trolls. And this is what you can fall into thinking. But what really changed my personal feeling is when I read some of Theodor Herzl's work. And I was very surprised by how much I agreed with it. Not just the language, but the sentiment of it. This is like a self-defense guy that like, this is a respectable guy. And Zionism, even Zionism has been like co-opted, because what he was talking about, I basically agree with. And I don't agree with, somehow making it right, or through international diplomacy, that you can do an occupation of a foreign land and then you have a right to this nation. I believe in conquering more than I believe in that. But the point is, he was espousing a lot of this stuff that I would say is very close to American Revolution, very close to natural law, human rights, these kind of things, especially self-defense. So, and really, this guy was double-crossed, really. Yeah, like he was the founder of Zionism, really, but what Zionism became, that has nothing to do with what it's turned out to be. It's really a shame. But anyway, I did Jewish Role in the Occult Web of Control. I refer you to that episode. I don't know if it's on YouTube or it's been taken down, but it's definitely on BitChute. It's the most popular video I have on BitChute, and of course I stand by everything I said about that. But I just didn't realize how much of a role the anti-Jewish side played as well, so I'm talking about it now. And I know that people get canceled at the drop of a hat for saying anti-Semitic. I may have already done that in this episode. But my question to you is that really even helping these people, or is it hurting them? Because I think it's hurting Jewish people in the long run, because it's like when you have the teacher protect you from bully and you get away one time. Is that not worse than even having to fight them? It's like, we all know that these people are coddled and protected, and there's all this victim mentality and everything. There's like, oh, they're crying victim every time something occurs. Well, all that does is make everybody that much more aggressive and polarized against them. Like, oh, we'll get them next time. And the bully's hatred grows and grows until it explodes. They've been a scapegoat for so long, and they're going to continue to be a scapegoat. And the goddamn Rothschilds and the Hollywood, the Epstein types, they're gonna get away scot-free again, because people are just too dumb. They're just too dumb, and honestly, that it's made both sides insufferable for me. I'm so tired of people repeating the same things. They're saying something, and I've already heard it. I've already seen it. I already know where their talking points are coming from. People never seem to grow in their understanding of the world, and actually they seem to regress as they get older, which is the real unfortunate thing. When I came across Malcolm X, I was like 13 years old, and he inspired me. Malcolm X was a black Muslim, right? He showed me that anger had actually a final form of sorts. That you could be a respectable figure, a real man, and honorably express that anger. And he, like, one of the first people that actually were like inspiring me to fight against injustice, and I did back in middle school. I was like a rebellious middle schooler. I would debate with the teachers about the things going on in the world. One of the first things I talk about is Palestine, and I used to say "Free Palestine" back in front of the whole class. But of course, there's so much I didn't know about this. And then I was 26, and when I was introduced to Ayn Rand. Now Ayn Rand is a white Jewish woman. Not by religion, but by birth. She's from a Jewish family. And she inspired me so much. Again, this is another person that like gave me a blueprint for my own dreams and aspirations to take very concrete form and to actually implement it in the world. And then also Ayn Rand gave me like the philosophical and academic background for what I already felt and knew about myself and the world. And the Malcolm X within me has never left. I used to say "Free Palestine" back in grade school, and I say it now. But I'll be damned if I get caught on either side of this circus. And I just don't understand how people fall into these things so easily. That they'll take a side and they'll ignore the historical background. And it's just more violent events in the world. That has all the tools. This world has all the tools to be peaceful, actually. And I'm just so fucking tired of innocent people getting killed. And I'm tired of the thoughts and prayers and condolences. I'm tired of having to say that. Notre Dame wins the game. These guys just won the game, and the confetti's coming down. And everybody has to say thoughts and prayers to the victims again. I'm tired of these innocent people getting killed. I want the guilty people to start getting killed. And I want the cleanup process to begin. Plenty of people need to be removed from this world. They're harming others, and it's that simple. And people want to super generalize and say that this nation or this religion is harming others. And then they'll say, no, but I'm not talking about all of them. It doesn't matter. You've already lost it. You're already talking about something that doesn't matter. Rather than talking about the ideas that drive their behavior, they're not talking about the occult agendas. They're not talking about the corruption at the top of their hierarchies. They think they're talking about it, but they fall into doing this stupid robot boxing on the field. And it's 2025, and I am just so angry about time too. I feel like I've had half my life taken away because of the ideas that I held and the information that was out there, but it was being drowned out and hidden, and it was hidden by all the garbage and all the nonsense that's all over the place. I was a drug addict for multiple years. I was a drug dealer for multiple years. I did all this stuff. I thought that I was being somebody, and it was just like I was tricked. And if I could have had access to all this stuff earlier, if somebody would have told me, but people really feel like they can't tell you shit. That's the thing. Like, even people in your family, people don't preach to people enough. Nobody feels like they can say, hey, what you're doing is fucked up. You need to stop doing that. People don't even say that anymore because they know they don't feel confident enough deep within themselves. They have a guilt, and they think, oh, what can I tell them? What can I tell a teenager? I was doing the same stuff when I was younger. That's right, because you didn't have a redemption arc. You didn't fix yourself. You didn't end the cycle. But at the end of the day, I only got myself to blame for my choices. And it's not like a grudge or resentment that I'm taking into the new year. It's just a hell of a fucking memory. Memories of everything that I lost and cycles that I refuse to repeat. It's all about breaking the cycle. It's not about even the historical background or all the symbolism. Fuck that. It's about taking your life back. Your life back. We've had it taken away from us. This is the true intifada. This is the real revolution. This is the real rebellion. It's about finding yourself again. And that's it. Thank you, and I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.